Hello, hello, hello. We are finally ready to start diving into the historical style periods for music, which is awesome. So, the first thing we need to ask is, what is a style period? Well, the word style in music refers to a characteristic way of treating the various musical elements. And those elements are melody, rhythm, tone color, dynamics, harmony, texture, and form. So we've covered some of these already, and we're going to be covering more of them as we go through. So if that's the definition of style, what's a style period? Well, it's the name we have given to different times in history, different periods of time where certain things were happening and how they were creating music. So for instance, if you tell me a composer was alive during the classical period, I could make some educated guesses about what the music would sound like. And you're like, wait, classical period. Isn't it all just classical music? Well, the classical style period is not the same as classical music, although pretty much most of our music in the classical period was what we think of as classical. So let's talk about the names of the historical style periods. So here we go. We've got Middle Ages, or the medieval period, kind of one or the other. We have the Renaissance, Baroque, Classical. We have the Romantic period, which sometimes gets referred to as the 19th century or the Romantic period, either one. We have the 20th century, and now we have the 21st century. So, which one of these time period spans the largest amount of time? So let's look at the general dates, and we can see that it's the Middle Ages. That covers a millennium of music history. Okay, that's a long time. And I want to say as a side note, these general dates that you see have changed since I first started college back in 1989. Historians can change their minds about when a time period started. They get new evidence, new research, and they're like, you know what, I think it actually started 200 years earlier on this date. So today we are going to start our exploration of the development of music through history with the Middle Ages. All right. So we are going to be covering roughly the year 450 to 1450. And you're thinking 450. Okay, we've just skipped a huge chunk of history, right? But this class isn't long enough to even touch the music of the ancient Greeks, right? So we are starting in around the year 450. And because the Middle Ages is actually so long, it's divided up into three sections: early, high, and late. And I'm always just like, shouldn't that be like early, middle, and late? They're like, no, it's the high Middle Ages. It's where things were like really, really good. All right. So we're going to start our musical exploration today with the early Middle Ages. And during this time, the church was the center of life with a capital C, right? This is the Christian church. And if we take a look at this beautiful church that was built between 1050 and 1057 in France, right? Number one, don't think because we're in the Middle Ages that it was all dark and dingy and not pretty. Like we think, oh, it was a long time ago. No. Check out this church, right? So if we're looking at this church and it's got these beautiful vaulted ceilings, what instruments are going to sound best in this kind of space? Well, the answer is mainly a cappella vocal music. So most music in the church was a cappella until about the year 1000, and then organs and bells became more common. So, vocal music, a cappella. What kind of vocal music do you think was heard in this church after it was built? If you said Gregorian chant, you would be correct. So we've already learned a little bit about Gregorian chant, right? We've learned that it is mainly monophonic, right? And certainly in the early Middle Ages, it was purely monophonic, right? Melody. It's only melody. So, what else do we know about Gregorian chant? Well, it was sung by monks and nuns for several hours a day in 2 types of church services. So, just as a side note, women were not allowed to sing in church, but they could sing in the convents, and they were allowed to receive musical training and compose. And we do have some famous women composers from this time who did that very thing. So, back to those 2 types of church services. They were the Mass and the offices. Now, I grew up Catholic, and so I knew exactly what a Mass was. The Mass is the celebration of the Last Supper, right? And there are 2 kinds of parts of the Mass: the ordinary and the proper. And you're just like, oh my gosh, all these words are swimming around in my head. So ordinary is just the ordinary things that you sang for every Mass. Think of it that way. Kyrie, Gloria, Credo, Sanctus, and the Agnus Dei, right? And of course, this was originally in Latin. Nowadays, you will do these generally in English, depending on where you go to church, if you go to a Catholic church. The proper is, if you think about what is proper to sing during Easter, what is proper to sing during Lent, what is proper to sing during Advent, right? So the proper is the parts that will change depending on what part of the liturgical year, right? That's the church year that you're in. So some examples of these might be the Alleluia. There's an example. During Lent, it is not proper or appropriate to sing the Alleluia because we are in Lent. So you don't get to sing the Alleluia until Easter Sunday. And that was always just a really joyful part of Mass on Easter Sunday. So that's the Mass. Then we have the offices. And you're like, I don't even know what that means. Well, it was 8 different services per day. So everybody says Mass every day, or they celebrate Mass every day. And then they would have these 8 offices. And you can see here that they pretty much were either celebrating Mass or celebrating the offices, or they were probably working in between. So there was a lot of worship going on. Because remember, these are worship services. So we have these 8 different offices, and they are done at different times of the day. It's a lot of celebration. And in terms of music, there was a lot of music going on. Okay? So let's take a look at the original notation from a chant example and see what else we can glean from that. So if we look at it, we see that this is not a regular notation. There are not enough lines and spaces. There are some funky shaped notes, and it's just confusing to look at. So if I look at this in modern notation, thank you for somebody putting this into modern notation for us, what are we going to see? Well, number 1, there's no rhythmic notation. Like, that's not a thing yet. They literally haven't invented it yet. So we just spent all that time going over rhythm. It's simple division of the beat, compound division of the beat, and we clapped out something. No, none of that. There's no rhythmic notation. All right? So, put your head around that for a minute. Now we're going to talk about melody. So what do we see? Melody is mostly stepwise, right? Not a lot of leaps, very narrow range of pitches. And in fact, if you were singing this, you would just pick a starting pitch that was comfortable for you to sing. Everyone knew the tune, right? So it really didn't matter. Just everyone, let's start singing together. Okay? There are no sharps or flats. There are no key signatures. Hadn't been invented yet. Okay? So you learn how to read music, you learn about note values and rhythm. Nope. You learn about nope, no key signatures, no sharps, no flats. What about dynamics? Nope. There are not any dynamic instructions to tell us how loud or soft or fast or slow to perform. Nothing. So let's give it a listen and let's see what we hear. All right. So this is a very beautiful Gregorian chant. And when we listen to it, it just seems very calm, sort of otherworldly, right? It definitely is sort of inspiring. There's a flexible rhythm, but we don't feel like there's a beat. Like I'm not feeling like I'm just feeling the beat. It's just not there. It's really meant to just flow. And the melodies, again, have a very narrow range of pitches, not super high, not super low. Let's look at the notation, and we're going to listen to a little bit of that again and try to follow along. So you may have noticed how the performer could sing one syllable on many different pitches. Like, wow, they just keep going. Well, that's called melismatic singing. And if you think about being extra joyful and you're just like, I'm singing words to the Lord and I can't contain my joy, and so I have to sing a lot of notes. That's basically what melismatic singing should be. It should come from a place of joy. So we also listen and we hear this idea that it's sort of like a heavenly, otherworldly sound. And that's from the use of modes. Now, right now, you're probably used to major and minor keys, even if you don't know exactly how they're different. If I play them for you, you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a minor key and that's a major key. Major sounds a little bit happier, minor sounds a little bit sad, but modes are completely different. So we're going to be studying scales later in the year, major, minor. We're not studying modes, all right? You just need to realize that they base their music on patterns that sound very different to us nowadays. Where you're probably going to hear these is if you watch a movie or television show that is trying to reference you back to that time. You will hear things that are written in modes, and it automatically makes us think of an older time, the olden days, right? All right, so we're going to wind up the introduction to the Middle Ages. Have a great day, and I will see you for part 2.